In a previous video, I looked at post-Soviet Ukraine in the 1990s up to the so-called cassette scandal of 2000. In December of that year, mass protests broke out in Kiev. The opposition launched a non-violent resistance campaign that they named Ukraine Without Kuchma, and soon the president's approval rating plunged to 9%. In this episode, I will discuss what happened after 2000, what changed and what remained the same in the country. Various political parties, students and opposition activists participated in the campaign, which gave an opportunity for its prominent leaders like Yulia Tymoshenko to become well known. Kuchma received 3 leaders of the campaign, but he refused major concessions, and his prime minister, Viktor Yushchenko, sided with him. Clashes with the riot police broke out in March 2001. Public support for the campaign slowly diminished. Then mass arrests took place, and the resistance movement was done. In May, Kuchma sacked Yushchenko, who switched sides and led the Our Ukraine bloc in the 2002 parliamentary election. Despite reports of violence and the media blackout that affected opposition parties, Our Ukraine, shown with orange, became the largest faction, relying on Western Ukraine, while the East supported Kuchma's coalition, which soon fell apart due to the disappointing result. Kuchma claimed that he desired an association and a free trade agreement with the EU, and that Ukraine would meet all membership requirements by 2010, but at the same time, he signed a treaty both with Russia and NATO, trying to balance between the two sides. He appointed Viktor Yanukovych as prime minister, whose cabinet moved closer to Russia, although it also declared support for Ukraine's EU, but not NATO membership. In 2004, Kuchma announced that he would not run again. Instead, Yanukovych would be his candidate in the presidential election, who would compete with Viktor Yushchenko, Kuchma's former prime minister, who ran as an independent with a modernized platform that included liberal and pro-EU slogans. Yanukovych won the election by a narrow margin, once again relying on the eastern and southern oblasts, but the other side accused him of vote rigging and intimidation. In late November, massive protests erupted in Kiev and other cities, which was the beginning of the Orange Revolution. 500,000 people showed up in Independence Square, while pro-Yanukovych demonstrations took place in the east and the south, in regions with closer ties to Russia. Yushchenko negotiated with outgoing President Kuchma, but Yanukovych was declared as the winner, although the Supreme Court soon invalidated the official result and ordered a repeat of the second round, which Yushchenko easily won with 52% of the votes. He was sworn in as president in January 2005, but by that time he was seriously ill, he was bloated, his face was disfigured. Subsequent examinations determined that these were the symptoms of dioxin poisoning, allegedly orchestrated by men close to the government. As president, he dismissed key figures, then appointed his rival Yulia Tymoshenko as prime minister, while Petro Poroshenko, another competitor, became secretary of the National Defense Council. In the same year, former President Kuchma was granted immunity in return for his graceful departure, so he no longer had to fear prosecution. The Yushchenko presidency was not any better, though. Internal division remained. In September, he fired the entire government, including Tymoshenko, after claims of corruption. Then former President Kravchuk claimed that Yushchenko's campaign had been financed by exiled Russian oligarch Boris Berezovsky, which was illegal since he was a foreign citizen. Yushchenko's popularity declined. In the 2006 parliamentary elections, his Our Ukraine bloc received only 14%, while the Tymoshenko bloc got 22%, and the Party of Regions, led by Yanukovych, received 32% of the votes. Yanukovych, who allied himself with the socialists and communists, thus defeated Team Orange and became prime minister. Naturally, President Yushchenko was not happy. In April 2007, he tried to dissolve parliament, but he ran into serious opposition. A few months later, early elections were finally held. The alliance of Tymoshenko and Yushchenko obtained the majority of seats. Team Orange was back in power, pushing Yanukovych into opposition. Tymoshenko once again became prime minister, but the two allies soon became bitter enemies. In 2008, while the war between Russia and Georgia was raging and the financial crisis commenced, Tymoshenko's party voted with the communists to pass legislation that would limit the president's powers. Yushchenko took it personal. He again tried to dissolve parliament, but his decree was suspended and then it lapsed. Tymoshenko's cabinet could not be removed. She then accused the National Bank and the president of intentionally manipulating the national currency, but her government also had to deal with the ongoing crisis and its consequences. Another dispute regarding gas prices broke out with Russia in 2009, but in the end, an agreement was signed. Gas was once again sold directly to Ukraine at a lower price, removing non-transparent intermediaries that had been sucking money out of the system with the support of certain politicians. All this bickering, with opponents and allies alike, made the situation even worse. The population did not see any improvement. They just watched as one corrupt government was succeeded by another. The former allies ran separately in the 2010 presidential elections, dividing their side. Yushchenko's support collapsed. Tymoshenko then narrowly lost against Yanukovych, who became president and promised a balanced policy regarding Russia and the EU. He vetoed a new tax code and failed to deliver a raise of pensions, but then he extended the Russian lease on naval facilities in the Crimea. He promised welfare increases, although this had prompted the IMF to stop its funding back in 2009. Then he cut social benefits for Chernobyl rescue workers and veterans of the Afghanistan war. He was soon accused of creating a controlled democracy, especially after a number of criminal cases were started against Yulia Tymoshenko, which led to her imprisonment. In the 2012 parliamentary election, amid accusations of fraud, her party came in second, so Yanukovych was able to keep his own in power. The old-new cabinet relied on ministers who came from the eastern half of the country. Donetsk and Luhansk oblasts received most of the funding, so it's not surprising that Yanukovych and his government were accused of corruption and cronyism. In November 2013, after the president strengthened ties with Russia, protests once again started in Kiev, demanding stronger European integration. In February, opposition talks with Yanukovych broke down, violence erupted, dozens died, then an interim government was formed, and the president fled to Russia. Ukraine's eastern neighbor reacted quickly. The Crimea was invaded without any opposition, while in the Donbas, armed groups took control of government buildings and proclaimed two independent People's Republic. Snap presidential elections were held in May, which Petro Poroshenko won by a large margin. He had to deal with the separatists, Russia's intervention, an economic crisis, and the opposition in parliament. The economic part of the EU Association Agreement was signed in June. Parliamentary elections were held in October, this time without the communists, who were then removed. The armed forces were reformed, a national guard was created, but in the meantime, the national currency fell and inflation shot up, while the country's GDP declined. Poroshenko relied on foreign specialists and oligarchs, but his war on corruption was marked by scandals, and while he did achieve some results, his rule was very controversial. In 2019, former comedian Volodymyr Zelensky won the presidential election with 73% of the votes, while in the snap parliamentary election, the new president's Servant of the People party was able to form a majority government alone, which was unprecedented. A new cabinet was then formed, but it fared no better than its predecessors. The economy continued to decline, and the banning of pro-Russian TV channels was no consolation. The pandemic worsened the economic situation, the president's popularity sank, until Russia decided to invade the country in late February 2022, the same month Ukraine applied to join the EU. I have already talked about the war and its main developments, so I will stop here. Thank you for watching. See you in the next one.